The city was loud that evening, the kind of loud that made people feel small inside their own thoughts. Cars moved slowly through long lines of traffic. Horns sounded impatiently, and bright lights reflected off the tall glass buildings that filled the downtown streets. Inside one of those buildings, on the very top floor, a woman sat alone in a large office that looked over the entire city. Her desk was neat, her computer screen filled with reports, and her phone had been ringing almost all day. She was the chief executive of a powerful technology company, a position many people dreamed of but very few understood. To the outside world, she was successful, confident, and admired. Her face appeared in business magazines, and her company was growing faster every year. But tonight, she looked tired. She leaned back in her chair and rubbed her eyes for a moment. Another meeting had just ended, another long conversation about profits, investors, and future plans. All day people had treated her like she was someone special, someone important. Yet the strange thing was that she often felt more alone than ever. Her phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen and sighed when she saw the message. It was from a close friend who had been trying for weeks to set her up on a blind date. "Please don't cancel again," the message said. "He's a good man. Just meet him once." She stared at the words for a long moment. Blind dates had never worked for her. Every time someone discovered who she really was, everything changed. Some men suddenly became nervous around her. Others tried too hard to impress her. A few seemed more interested in her company and money than in her as a person. After years of these awkward meetings, she had grown tired of the entire idea. Still, her friend had insisted again and again, promising that this man was different. Supposedly he was kind, honest, and a single father who lived a simple life. Simple life. The thought almost made her laugh. Her own life had not been simple for many years. Running a company meant endless responsibility, constant pressure, and very little privacy. Even outside the office, people often treated her like a walking opportunity instead of a normal human being. She picked up her phone again and read the message one more time. Then she had an idea. A slow smile appeared on her face, the kind of smile that meant trouble. "If they want me to go," she murmured quietly to herself, "I'll go." But she had no intention of making the evening pleasant. If this blind date ended quickly, her friend might finally stop pushing her into these situations. All she had to do was make sure the man sitting across from her would lose interest immediately. The plan formed in her mind quickly. Instead of dressing the way she normally did, elegant, confident, and polished, she would do the opposite. She would arrive looking messy, unpleasant, and rude enough to make anyone regret meeting her. The thought almost made the entire situation entertaining. She shut down her computer and stood up from her chair. The large office suddenly felt less heavy than it had a few minutes earlier. Later that evening, her expensive apartment looked very different from its usual appearance. Clothes were scattered across the bed as she searched for the worst possible outfit. Finally, she found an old sweater that was far too big for her and a pair of plain shoes that looked worn out. She tied her hair loosely so it looked untidy and placed oversized glasses on her face. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Perfect, but the clothes were only part of the plan. Her attitude would finish the job. She practiced a small frown in the mirror and crossed her arms. If the man asked polite questions, she would answer with short replies. If he tried to be friendly, she would respond with sarcasm. 10 minutes into the date, he would probably invent an excuse to leave. Problem solved. The cafe where they planned to meet was quiet and comfortable, located on a calm street away from the busy center of the city. It was the kind of place where people sat for hours talking over coffee and reading books. She arrived a few minutes early and chose a table near the window. The warm light inside the cafe felt strange after the cool air outside. People were chatting softly around her, and the smell of fresh coffee filled the room. For a moment, she wondered if her plan was childish. But then she remembered the dozens of disappointing dates she had already endured, and her determination returned. A few minutes later, the door opened again. A man stepped inside, looking around the cafe carefully as if searching for someone. He wore simple clothes and carried himself with a calm kind of confidence that didn't seem forced. He wasn't flashy or overly dressed like some of the businessmen she often met. Instead, he looked like someone who had just finished a normal day of work. His eyes stopped when he saw her, sitting near the window. He walked toward the table with a small, polite smile. "Hello," he said gently. "Are you the person I'm supposed to meet tonight?" She glanced up slowly, making sure her expression looked annoyed. "I guess," she replied without much interest. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "My friend told me your name earlier," he said, "but I'm glad we still managed to find each other." She shrugged slightly. "Lucky you." The man paused for a second, clearly noticing her tone, but the smile didn't disappear from his face. "I'm glad you came," he said simply. She almost rolled her eyes. Here it comes, she thought. Any second now he'll realize this was a mistake. A waiter came to take their order. She barely looked at the menu before asking for the cheapest coffee on the list. When the waiter left, silence settled between them for a moment. The man finally spoke again. "My daughter insisted that I shouldn't cancel tonight," he said with a small laugh. "She thinks I spend too much time working and reading." She raised an eyebrow. "You let your kid plan your social life?" "Sometimes," he replied calmly. "Kids can be surprisingly wise." She leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "Well, I hope she enjoys being wrong." Instead of looking offended, he chuckled softly. "That's possible too." The response caught her slightly off guard. Most people reacted to her sharp comments with discomfort or irritation. This man seemed completely relaxed. She decided to try harder. "This place is boring," she said after a moment, glancing around the cafe with clear disapproval. "Why would anyone choose it for a date?" "I like quiet places," he replied. "They make it easier to hear real conversations." She scoffed. "Real conversations? That sounds exciting." Again, he only smiled. As the minutes passed, something unexpected began happening. He didn't leave, no matter how cold or sarcastic her comments became. He stayed calm and polite. Instead of arguing, he simply answered honestly or responded with gentle humor. The coffee arrived, and they continued talking. Well, he talked. She mostly gave short, dismissive replies. But even through her act, she noticed something strange. He didn't seem fake. There was no nervous energy, no attempt to impress her, and no interest in asking about money or status. Instead, he spoke about his daughter, about books he enjoyed, and about the small community library where he worked. At one point, he told a funny story about a child who insisted that dinosaurs still existed somewhere in the world. Before she realized it, a small laugh escaped her lips. She froze immediately. For a brief second, the rude mask slipped away. He noticed. His eyes brightened slightly, as if he had just discovered a secret. "There it is," he said quietly. She frowned again quickly. "What?" "That laugh," he replied. "It sounds real." She looked at him carefully now, trying to understand why he wasn't reacting the way most people did. "You're very patient," she said bluntly. "Sometimes," he answered. "With rude strangers, too?" He shrugged lightly. "Sometimes rude strangers are just people having a difficult day." His words landed more softly than she expected. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. The evening was not going the way she planned. At all. She had expected him to leave quickly, maybe after 10 minutes. Instead, he was still sitting across from her, calmly drinking his coffee and talking as if nothing about the situation felt uncomfortable. And strangely, for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like someone was trying to impress her. She felt like someone was simply talking to her, not the CEO, not the powerful businesswoman, just her. The realization made her uncomfortable in a way she didn't expect. So she leaned forward again, determined to push harder. "Let me guess," she said sharply. "You think you're some kind of hero for staying here?" He shook his head calmly. "No," he said. "I just think everyone deserves at least one honest conversation." She stared at him for a moment. Something about that simple answer made the room feel strangely quiet. And for the first time since the date began, she wasn't sure she wanted him to leave anymore. The quiet inside the cafe felt different now. The sound of cups touching saucers, the soft music in the background, and the low conversations from other tables blended together like a calm rhythm. Outside the window, cars continued passing under the yellow streetlights, but inside, time seemed to move slower. She still sat with her arms crossed, holding on to the rude attitude she had planned earlier. But something about the man across from her made the act harder to maintain. He didn't look uncomfortable. He didn't look annoyed. Instead, he seemed relaxed, as if meeting someone who was being sarcastic and cold was simply part of life. She studied him more carefully now. His clothes were simple but clean. His hands looked slightly rough, like someone who worked with books and shelves all day rather than typing on expensive keyboards. His posture was straight, but not stiff. Most of all, his eyes looked calm. Not the kind of calm someone fakes to impress another person. The kind that comes from living through difficult things and learning how to stay steady anyway. She didn't like how easily he seemed to see through her attitude. "So," she said after a moment, her voice still sharp, "do you always talk this much to strangers?" He smiled a little. "Only the interesting ones." She narrowed her eyes. "Interesting? I've been rude since you sat down." "Yes," he said, nodding gently. "That's part of what makes it interesting." She leaned forward slightly. "You enjoy people insulting you?" "Not really," he said, "but sometimes people act a certain way because they're protecting something." She scoffed loudly. "Wow, now you're analyzing me too." He lifted his hands, slightly as if surrendering. "No analyzing, just observing." She shook her head and looked away toward the window, pretending she was bored again. But inside, she felt something unfamiliar. Curiosity. Most men she had met in the past reacted to her confidence in two ways. Either they tried too hard to compete with it, or they became nervous around it. This man was doing neither. He simply stayed the same. The waiter walked past their table again, refilling water glasses. The man thanked him politely. She noticed that. Small details like that were easy to ignore, but they often revealed more about a person than big speeches. "Do you always come to places like this?" she asked suddenly. "Sometimes," he replied. "It's close to the library where I work." She raised an eyebrow again. "You actually like working in a library?" He chuckled softly. "I do. That sounds slow." "It can be," he admitted, "but it's also peaceful." She tapped her fingers on the table. "And that doesn't bore you?" "Not really." He leaned back slightly, thinking, "Everyday kids come in looking for books about dinosaurs, space, or adventures. Some of them have never owned a book before. When they find one they love, their faces light up." He smiled faintly as he spoke. That moment never gets boring. She watched his expression carefully. There was no exaggeration in his voice, no attempt to impress her. He was simply describing something that mattered to him. "You must make a lot of money doing that," she said with obvious sarcasm. He laughed. "No, not even close." "So why stay?" He shrugged lightly. "Because it's meaningful." The answer was simple, but it made her pause. In her world, conversations often revolve around profit, investments, and expansion. People constantly asked how much something earned or how fast it could grow. Rarely did someone answer a question with a word like meaningful. She quickly forced the rude tone back into her voice. "Well, that's nice for you. But some people prefer ambition." "Ambition is good," he said calmly. "And you're not ambitious?" "I am." She tilted her head. "Really? About what?" He thought for a moment before answering. "Raising my daughter well." The sentence was so straightforward that she blinked. "That's your ambition?" "One of them." She leaned back again, tried to regain control of the conversation. "You're very calm about everything." He smiled again. "Life taught me to be." "How?" He looked down at his coffee cup for a moment before answering. "After my wife passed away a few years ago, things changed quickly." His voice didn't sound dramatic or heavy, but there was quiet truth in it. "I suddenly had to become both parents for a little girl who didn't fully understand what had happened. At first, everything felt overwhelming." She didn't interrupt. "Over time," he continued, "I realized something. Kids watch how you react to life. If you stay angry or bitter all the time, they learn that from you." He looked up again. "So I decided to try something different." "And what was that?" she asked, staying patient. The answer was simple again, but it carried weight. For the first time since the date started, she forgot to act rude. She simply listened. He noticed a change but didn't mention it. "My daughter is the reason I came tonight." he added with a small smile. She believes I should meet new people instead of hiding behind books. She almost smiled again but caught herself. So you're here because your kid forced you, more or less. And what if this date is terrible? He laughed quietly. Then I'll still have a funny story to tell her tomorrow. That made her shake her head. You're impossible to offend. Not impossible, he said. Just difficult. She stared at him again, trying to understand what made him different. Most people reacted strongly to her attitude. Some argued back. Others became uncomfortable. He simply absorbed it without letting it change who he was. It was like throwing stones into a lake and watching the water remain calm. Can I ask you something? He said after a moment. She sighed dramatically. Sure. Why not? Why did you really come tonight? The question surprised her. What do you mean? You don't seem excited to be here, he said gently. But you still came. She opened her mouth, ready to deliver another sarcastic answer. But something stopped her, because the real answer was complicated. She had come because she was tired of being treated like a business deal instead of a human being. She had come because her friend kept insisting, and she had come with a plan to ruin the entire evening. Instead, she gave a short shrug. Maybe I was bored. That's honest, he said. She frowned slightly. You believe that? I believe boredom makes people do interesting things. She looked at him for a long moment. You're very strange. I've been told that before. The waiter brought a small plate of cookies to their table. A free treat the cafe often gave to customers late in the evening. The man slid the plate toward her. You should try one, he said. She raised an eyebrow. You think cookies will improve this date? No, he said with a grin. But they might improve your mood. She rolled her eyes but took one anyway. To her surprise, they were actually good. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. They simply sat there, drinking coffee and watching the quiet movement of people around them. It felt oddly comfortable. Then he spoke again. You know something? What? You're not as rude as you pretend to be. Her head snapped up immediately. Excuse me. He kept his voice calm. Every now and then your real reactions slip out. That's ridiculous. You laughed earlier, he reminded her. She crossed her arms again. That was an accident. Maybe. His eyes studied her gently, not with judgment but curiosity. You also listen carefully when someone talks about something meaningful. She looked away again, annoyed that he kept noticing things. You think you know me after 1 hour? No, he said softly. But I think you're hiding. The words landed between them like a small stone dropped into water. She felt an unexpected reaction inside her chest. Not anger, something closer to discomfort. Because in a strange way, he wasn't completely wrong. She stood up slightly as if preparing to leave, then hesitated. He watched quietly, not stopping her. Finally, she sat back down again. Don't get confident, she said. This date is still terrible. He smiled warmly. Maybe. Then he added something that made her pause. But terrible dates usually end quickly. She glanced at the clock on the cafe wall. They had already been sitting there for more than an hour. And somehow, despite her best efforts, he was still there. More surprisingly, so was she. The night had settled fully outside, casting soft shadows across the quiet streets. Street lights glowed against the sidewalks, and the occasional car passed, its headlights flickering across the windows of the cafe. Inside, the warm glow from hanging lamps painted gentle circles of light on the tables. The cozy hum of conversation surrounded them, but at their table, the world felt almost still. She had stopped trying to act rude. The sharp, sarcastic tone she had planned for the evening had quietly faded, replaced by a strange mixture of curiosity and caution. For hours, she had tried to push him away, but he had stayed calm and kind, never giving her the reaction she expected. Somehow this man, the simple, unassuming single father, had refused to leave, and now she couldn't decide if she wanted him to. He was talking again, his voice gentle and patient. It must be strange, he said, being someone everyone expects to be perfect. She raised an eyebrow. Perfect? Yes, he said simply. Perfect in the sense that people always assume you should be. Polished. Successful. Always smiling. always knowing what to say. Do you know what I mean? She looked away for a moment, studying the flickering candle on the table. He had a point. Most people did assume that, but it was exhausting. She wasn't sure she had ever had a conversation like this, where no one was trying to impress or judge her. Here, she felt normal. I suppose, she admitted softly, but most people like it that way. They want to see the polished side, the strong, confident side, the one who doesn't make mistakes. He nodded. But what about the side that does make mistakes? The side that's tired, lonely, or scared? She felt the words hit deeper than she expected. No one had ever asked that question with such quiet understanding. Most people ignored those sides entirely, or they tried to fix them for her. I don't know, she whispered, almost to herself. Most people don't want to see that. That's why I like libraries, he said suddenly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. In a library, everything feels honest. Books don't pretend. They're exactly what they are. Sometimes, it's the only place where things are simple and real. She tilted her head, surprised by the thought. Libraries weren't glamorous or exciting in the way her world was used to, but there was something comforting about the idea. Maybe he was right. Maybe some things didn't need to be complicated. I suppose that makes sense, she said, taking a slow sip of her coffee. I've never thought of it that way. He leaned forward slightly, resting his arms on the table. Most people don't. They want things to be bigger, faster, shinier. But real value isn't always that obvious. Sometimes it's quiet and simple, and it takes patience to see it. She studied him carefully. His words were unpolished, but genuine. His eyes were steady, not searching for approval or admiration. He didn't care about her appearance, her job, or her wealth. He cared about the conversation, the truth, and the small moments. For a moment, she felt an unfamiliar warmth in her chest. It was like a small light turning on in a room she hadn't noticed before. Do you really think people could be that simple? She asked, unsure she wanted the answer. I think they can, he replied calmly. Sometimes it takes a long time to see, and sometimes it doesn't happen at all. But it's there. She couldn't respond immediately. She looked down at her coffee cup, swirling it slowly. His presence was oddly calming, and she felt herself lowering her defenses without realizing it. The conversation shifted naturally after that, from quiet thoughts to small stories about life. He told her about mornings at the library when the sunlight would hit the shelves just right, when a child's excitement about discovering a new book would make him laugh. She found herself listening, not judging, not acting, just listening. You really love this, she said quietly, her tone softer than before. I do, he said. It's not always easy, but it's rewarding. Kids notice things adults often ignore. You have to pay attention, and that makes you better at noticing the little things that matter. She smiled faintly, a smile that felt honest. I envy that, she admitted. I spend so much time trying to be perfect that I forget to notice anything else. He nodded. I think everyone does that sometimes. Life pushes us to focus on appearances, money, status, all the things that seem important but aren't really. Her chest tightened slightly. He was describing her life perfectly, the way no one had ever dared to say it aloud. She had spent so many years hiding behind walls, pretending she didn't feel tired or lonely or frustrated. But here, across the table from him, she felt like those walls were gently crumbling. I don't know why I expected tonight to be different, she said, a small laugh escaping her lips. Because you were expecting me to leave, he said with a grin, and I didn't. She laughed more openly now, shaking her head. I thought I could scare you off easily. I even planned it. I dressed terribly and acted unpleasant. I noticed, he said calmly, but it didn't matter. She froze for a moment. It didn't. No, he said, his voice steady. I could see through it. And honestly, I was curious. I wanted to meet the real person, even if it took a little time. Her stomach fluttered. No one had ever said something like that to her before. People usually reacted to her power, her status, her money. Very few looked past all of that. Very few wanted the real her. You really mean that? She asked quietly, her voice soft. Yes, he said without hesitation. I don't care about titles or appearances. I care about the person sitting across from me. She felt her heart beat a little faster. It was a strange, thrilling feeling. She had come prepared to ruin the evening, to make it unbearable, and now she was thinking she didn't want it to end. For the next hour, the conversation flowed naturally. They talked about simple things. The books he loved, the little traditions he shared with his daughter, the quiet moments that made life feel meaningful. She shared small stories too, carefully, not revealing too much about her wealth or position, but still feeling a connection she hadn't expected. At one point, he told her about a rainy afternoon when his daughter insisted they make paper boats to float in the puddles outside the library. She laughed genuinely at the image. "You make it sound magical," she said. "It was," he said simply. "Sometimes magic is in the smallest things. People just forget to notice." She realized he was right. Her life had been filled with big events, flashy moments, and constant attention, but she often missed the quiet magic around her. Seeing it through his stories made her feel lighter. The cafe began to empty slowly as the night grew later. Soft music played from the speakers, and the last few customers whispered goodbyes to each other. The warm light from the lamps seemed even cozier now. She glanced at the clock. Hours had passed, and yet it hadn't felt long at all. "I didn't expect to enjoy tonight," she said softly, almost to herself. "I'm glad you did," he said. "I think you were trying not to, but it seems the night had other plans." She laughed again, shaking her head. "I suppose it did." He leaned back in his chair, resting his hands on the table. "You know, I'm not the type to judge people by their mistakes or their appearances. Everyone has a side they hide, and sometimes that side is exactly the one worth seeing." She stared at him, feeling something shift inside. He didn't just see her disguise, he saw her, the real her, the tired, complicated, slightly broken part of her she rarely let anyone touch. "I'm not used to that," she admitted. "I know," he said gently. "Most people aren't. That's why we hide parts of ourselves. But when someone notices the real you and doesn't run away, it changes things." For the first time in years, she felt safe. Safe enough to let her guard down, even just a little. They sat in quiet for a few moments, sipping their coffee, letting the calmness settle between them. The world outside still moved fast, still demanded attention and action, but inside at this small table, everything was simple and clear. "You're strange," she said suddenly, smiling faintly. "In a good way?" he asked with a small grin. "Maybe," she said. "I suppose I like it." He chuckled softly, and the warmth in her chest grew a little stronger. She realized that for the first time in a long while, she wasn't thinking about escaping, about pretending, or about disappointing anyone. She was simply present. And that, she thought, was a feeling worth holding on to. Hours passed. The cafe grew quieter, and the conversation continued to flow, gentle and honest. For the first time, she wasn't trying to manipulate the situation. She wasn't planning an exit. She wasn't hiding behind a mask. She was simply there, and somehow that made everything feel a little more real. For the first time, she began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, this blind date wasn't going to be ruined after all. Days passed after that first evening, and she couldn't stop thinking about him. His calm presence, the honesty in his voice, the way he didn't react to her rude act like everyone else did. It all stayed with her. She found herself remembering little details, like the way his eyes softened when he spoke about his daughter, or the small laugh he gave when she accidentally dropped her sarcasm. The memory made her smile quietly to herself, and she realized she wanted to see him again. But this time, she wanted to show the real her. No masks, no disguises, no deliberate rudeness. The thought was both exciting and terrifying. What if he didn't like her when he saw who she truly was? What if her wealth, her position, or the world she came from became a problem? She tried to push the fear aside. She reminded herself that she couldn't hide forever. The truth had come out sooner or later. She chose a quiet cafe near the park for their second meeting. The evening was calm, with a gentle breeze rustling the leaves outside. Inside, the light was warm, and a few customers lingered over late coffee and soft conversation. She arrived a little early, dressed simply yet elegantly, her hair neat and a soft smile on her face. She hoped it would show him a version of herself that wasn't pretending, one he could recognize from the moments he glimpsed her first evening. When he arrived, he looked slightly surprised to see her without the messy sweater, oversized glasses, and slouched posture from their first meeting. But the surprise quickly melted into a gentle, genuine smile. "You look different," he said lightly, as he pulled out the chair across from her. "I suppose I do," she admitted softly, almost nervously. "I wanted to be honest this time." He nodded slowly, not saying anything judgmental, just observing her with quiet interest. "I'm glad," he said. "I was curious to see you like this." The conversation started gently, a natural flow of words about their day, the weather, and small trivial things. But soon, it moved into more personal territory. She told him about her work, her responsibilities, and the pressures that came with running company. She spoke carefully, aware that her world was different from his, but she wanted him to understand a part of her life. "I spend so much time trying to manage everything," she said, "that sometimes I forget what it's like to just breathe, to just live without pretending. That's why I was so scared to meet you the first time. I didn't want to be seen the way I really am." He listened quietly, nodding with understanding. "It's hard for people to see each other honestly," he said. "Most are afraid of being judged, or they think the other person won't understand. But I think honesty is the only way to connect." She felt a warmth inside her chest. His words were simple, but they carried weight. He wasn't trying to impress her. He wasn't trying to manipulate her. He simply accepted what she was saying. They spoke for hours, the way they had the first night, but this time the conversation was deeper, more open. She found herself laughing at small jokes, sharing memories she hadn't told anyone in years, and admitting fears she had never voiced. "I've always felt like I had to be someone else," she said quietly. "Someone stronger, smarter, perfect. And when I failed, I hid it. But with you, I don't feel that way." "That's because I don't expect perfection," he said gently. "I care about the person sitting in front of me, not the person everyone else wants you to be." She looked at him carefully, feeling a mixture of relief and surprise. How could someone she had met only once see her more clearly than most people who had known her for years? As the evening progressed, they shared stories about their childhoods, their families, and the moments that shaped them. He spoke about his daughter, the small lessons he taught her, and the quiet joys they shared together. She shared glimpses of her own life, the pressure she carried, and the rare moments of peace she found in books and walks through quiet streets. At one point, he looked at her seriously. "I want you to know something," he said. "I've seen people pretend their whole lives. Some never stop, but I saw you that first night. The real you, even behind the jokes and the rude act. I could tell who you are." She felt her heart skip a beat. "You really mean that?" "I do," he said softly. "I don't care about what the world expects from you. I care about the person who laughs, who feels, who lives honestly. That's the person I want to know." Her chest tightened. She had expected skepticism, disbelief, or even doubt. But instead, he spoke with quiet certainty, acceptance, and respect. For a moment, she was silent, letting the words sink in. It was not often that someone saw her for who she truly was and still wanted to be near her. The thought was both thrilling and comforting. The cafe began to empty as the night grew later, leaving them in a quiet corner. Outside, the streetlights reflected on the wet pavement from a brief rain earlier in the evening, and the soft hum of the city was distant but present. "I was nervous," she admitted suddenly. "Nervous that you wouldn't like the real me, that the masks I worn would push you away." He reached out slightly, a hand resting gently on the table. "You don't need masks with me," he said. "I want the real you, not the one the world forces you to be." She felt warmth spread through her body, a mixture of relief, happiness, and something she had not felt in a long time. Trust. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to let go of all the armor she had built around herself for years. "I don't know if I've ever let someone see me like this," she admitted softly. "Not fully, not without hiding parts of myself." "Then maybe this is a beginning," he said quietly. "A chance to just be ourselves, without pretending, without fear." She looked into his eyes and saw sincerity, a depth that made her feel understood. For the first time, she didn't have to perform. She didn't have to manipulate, and she didn't have to hide. The night grew quieter, the cafe dimmer, but they remained there, talking, laughing softly, and sharing moments that felt honest and unguarded. For hours, they stayed in that space where nothing else mattered except the truth between them. At one point, she realized she hadn't thought about her work, her company, or her responsibilities for a long stretch of time. She was present in the moment, fully engaged with someone who saw her as she truly was. "I never expected this," she said softly, smiling. "I thought I would be judged or laughed at or ignored, but you make it easy to be myself." "That's because I want to see the real you," he replied. "The one behind the walls and the masks. She's the one worth knowing." Her chest felt full, her heart lighter than it had been in years. For the first time, she realized that perhaps she didn't need to hide anymore. Perhaps someone could truly accept her, and not because of who she appeared to be, but because of who she really was. As the night ended, they stepped outside together. The city was quieter now, the streets glistening from the earlier rain, the air cool and refreshing. She walked beside him, feeling a strange comfort in his presence. The first evening had been filled with masks and pretenses. This evening had been real, honest, and freeing. She looked at him, a small smile on her face. "I'm glad I met you," she said. He smiled back, his eyes steady and calm. "So am I, more than you know." For the first time in years, she felt hope that connections could be genuine, hope that someone could see her for who she was, and hope that perhaps this strange blind date had turned into something meaningful. As they parted that night, there was no awkwardness, no pretenses, no tension, just a quiet understanding that something had begun, something real and honest, built on patience, trust, and the courage to reveal oneself without fear. She walked home slowly, thinking about the evening and the man who had seen her, really seen her, and had chosen to stay. For the first time, she felt that perhaps the world outside her office walls didn't have to define her. Perhaps real connections, like the one she was beginning, could exist, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe it. Weeks passed, and their connection grew stronger with each meeting. Every time they met, it was simple yet meaningful. Coffee at the same quiet cafe, walks through the park, small visits to the library where he worked. She never imagined that a blind date she had planned to ruin would turn into something so genuine, so human. It was unlike anything she had experienced before, and it surprised her more than she could admit. She began noticing the little things about him. The way he smiled when a child ran past in the park, the gentle patience in his voice when he explained something to her daughter on a rare occasion she joined him, the quiet laughter that seemed to come from his very soul rather than being forced. He was honest in a way that most people weren't. He had no pretense, no desire to impress. And slowly, she found herself dropping more and more the armor she had carried for so long. One afternoon, she arrived at his library. It was a small place filled with rows of books, the smell of old pages mingling with the faint scent of coffee from the cafe next door. She watched him help a child find a book on science experiments, his patience and kindness shining in each gesture. Seeing him in his element made her heart swell. This was his world, quiet, simple, and full of real moments. She realized she had never truly seen anything like it before. "Hello," she said softly, approaching him. He turned, a warm smile spreading across his face. "You're early," he said gently. "I wanted to see this place properly," she admitted. "It's peaceful." He nodded, his eyes glinting with quiet amusement. "It is. You see things differently when you slow down." She wandered through the aisles, touching the spines of books carefully, breathing in the calm of the library. He followed, guiding her through sections he thought she might like, but never pressuring, never judging. He simply shared, and she simply listened, absorbing the details that made this world so personal to him. Later, they sat together at a small reading table, sipping coffee she had brought from the cafe. The afternoon sunlight spilled through the windows, casting a soft glow around them. For a long while, they didn't speak. They simply existed in the quiet comfort of each other's presence, the kind of silence that didn't feel empty but full of connection. "I never expected this," she finally said, breaking the quiet. "I never imagined that after one night, I'd actually want to spend time like this, learning about someone's life, just listening." He smiled gently. "It's easier when someone's genuine. Most people come with expectations, masks, or pretenses. That's exhausting. But when you remove all that, you notice things that really matter. She nodded, feeling the truth of his words sink in. For so long, she had hidden behind layers of appearance, power, and perfection. But here, she felt safe to be real. The world outside could demand masks and facades, but with him, she didn't need them. Over the next few weeks, they continued to meet regularly. Each encounter revealed more about their personalities, their values, and their hearts. She learned how devoted he was to his daughter, how much he cherished simple joys, and how patient he could be even in the most stressful situations. He learned about her struggles to maintain balance in a demanding world, the rare moments when she allowed herself to feel, and the little comfort she clung to for peace. One evening, they sat on a bench near the park, the golden sunset spilling over the horizon. Children played nearby, their laughter blending with the distant hum of traffic. She leaned back against the bench, her hands folded in her lap, watching him as he observed the world with quiet delight. "You know," she began, "I never thought I'd meet someone who doesn't care about my title, my wealth, or my position. You treat me like a person." "Just me?" He turned to her, eyes soft. "Because that's who I want to know. Not the CEO everyone talks about, but the person who laughs, who worries, who feels. That's the person worth caring about." Her chest tightened. The words were simple, but they carried weight she hadn't felt in years. She had always believed that people would be drawn to what she had, not who she was. But he had proved her wrong. And that truth made her heart ache with a mixture of relief, gratitude, and something else she didn't dare name. "I've never felt like that before," she admitted quietly. "Never felt like someone saw me fully and still wanted to be with me." He reached out and gently held her hand. "You deserve that," he said softly. "Everyone does. And I want to be with you, not for what you have, but for who you are." Her eyes filled with emotion. No one had ever said such things to her so plainly, so sincerely. She had spent years guarding her heart, expecting people to notice only the surface. Now, for the first time, she felt a safe space opening up inside her chest, a space she could share with without fear or doubt. As the days turned into weeks, their bond deepened. He met her in the real world, the world of offices, boardrooms, and city streets. She visited his home, where his daughter's laughter echoed through the rooms, full of joy and life. They cooked together, laughed at small mistakes, and shared stories late into the night. She began to feel a connection that transcended appearances, titles, or societal expectations. She noticed the way he treated everyone around him, with kindness, respect, and patience. The way he helped strangers, encouraged children, and spoke gently to those who needed guidance. These moments, she realized, were what truly defined him. Not power, not wealth, not status. Just genuine care and humanity. One evening, after a long walk to the park, they sat on a bench, watching the stars slowly appear in the sky. She leaned against him, feeling the warmth of his shoulder. "I never thought a blind date could turn into this," she said softly. He chuckled. "Neither did I. But sometimes the best things happen when you least expect them." She smiled, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. "I tried to ruin our first meeting, remember?" she said, a small laugh escaping her lips. "And you didn't leave. You stayed, even when I acted terrible." He turned to her, a gentle smile on his face. "I could see the real you beneath the act. And I wanted to know her." Her heart fluttered. She had spent so long hiding, pretending, and protecting herself. And yet, here he was choosing to stay, choosing to see her, to understand her, to accept her. In the following months, their relationship grew naturally, without drama, without pretense. They faced challenges, of course, different worlds, different responsibilities, but they faced them together. He supported her without judgment, and she learned to trust him fully. She realized that love wasn't about grand gestures or appearances. It wasn't about wealth, status, or perfection. It was about understanding, acceptance, and the willingness to see someone truly as they are. One quiet evening, as they sat together reading side by side in the library, he turned to her and said softly, "I never care about your company, your title, or anything the world expects people to care about. I wanted you, the real you, and I'm still here." Tears welled in her eyes. "I never thought someone could see me and still want me," she whispered. He smiled gently, taking her hand. "You deserve that," he said, "and I will always be here to remind you of it." She leaned against him, letting herself feel the warmth, the love, and the acceptance she had never known. For the first time, she didn't need to hide. She didn't need to pretend. She didn't need to protect herself from a world that demanded perfection, because he had chosen her. Not the CEO, not the public figure, not the image the world created. He had chosen her, the person beneath the masks, the one who laughed, loved, and lived fully. And in that moment, she understood something she had never fully believed before. Love without masks, without pretenses, and without expectations was real. And it was more powerful than anything she had ever known. Together, they walked home under the soft glow of the streetlights, hand in hand, hearts open and full of hope. The journey had begun with a blind date, a disguise, and a plan to escape, but it had ended with honesty, trust, and the quiet discovery that the person who stayed through it all was the one worth keeping forever. She realized that sometimes the hardest walls to break are the ones we build around our hearts. And sometimes the person who sees through them and stays is the one who changes everything. For her, that person had been him. And for the first time in years, she felt safe, seen, and loved in a way that was simple, real, and true.